All right, let's pass it to Tammy.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Tammy Didion. I'm the Senior Director of the Primary Care Clinics for HHS. So I work at Whittier Clinic. Previously, I was the practice manager here at Whittier, and Jesus may be Whittier Clinic. Jesus, the manager, may be joining us as well. Here, as Whittier is at the end of the block, and it's going to Whittier Clinic is, and look forward to being part of this as it betters the community. So thank you.
Jesus, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yes, Jesus Chacon, I'm practice manager here at Whittier Clinic. Very excited to join.
Thanks for being here. Let's pass it to Assad. I see you just joined. We're just sharing name, what organization you're with, your pronouns if you'd like to share, and sort of why you decided to locate your organization or business here in Whittier.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Assad Ali Wade. I am the founder and executive director of New American Development Center, NADC, which is a community development organization. We focus on housing and economic development. We work with small businesses in South Minneapolis, especially this corridor. I pronounce my name, he is, and we locate our office here in South Minneapolis because overwhelming majority people we work with mostly from this area. So that's why we like to work here, have our offices here and based here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Nathan?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Nathan Kemmer, he, him, his pronouns. I work for the city of Minneapolis as a project engineer. Looking forward to working on this project.
Thanks, Nathan. Kelsey.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Kelsey Fote. I'm a transportation planner with the city of Minneapolis and Public Works. I'm working on the roadway portion of this project.
Rebecca.
Morning, everyone. Rebecca Perel. I work for the city of Minneapolis as well. I am in community planning and economic development. And I work on the real estate side of things here at CPED. And so we'll be working on redevelopment in the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. For those who joined after I mentioned this, we are recording the meeting here so we can share this information with folks who couldn't be here this morning. We may still have a few folks join as we move ahead here. And let's take a quick look at what we're going to chat about. So got through introductions. We're going to do a quick project overview and just kind of tell you a bit about what we've learned so far in community engagement process so far. The bulk of the meeting today will be discussing public space design concepts and the street design concepts. And then we'll kind of let you know what's next with the project. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to city team to take it away.
I can roll through these, Rebecca, if that works for you.
Sure, go for it.
Cool. All right. So a little bit of overview on the project here. The city now owns this site shown in blue. So it's the former Kmart site in South Minneapolis. I'm sure you all are familiar with it, given your proximity to the site, but it's bounded by Lake Street, Blaisdell, First Avenue, and Midtown Greenway. For a long time, there's been plans from both the community and the city to try to reconnect Nicollet through the site. So we finally acquired the site and are now working toward that goal to reconnect Nicollet through the site and then redevelop the rest of the site as a walkable, mixed use, high density kind of area. So that's Rebecca's team working on that. And we are, our team is working on the street portion. We've got a few project goals that we developed from an earlier round of public engagement, which started in August of 2022 and went through January of this year. Those goals are reconnecting people in places, building for who's here, making sure that we're building something that's representative and supportive for the folks that are already in this area, building something that can allow people to live, work, shop, and play all in the area. That when we're building those transportation pieces of the project, that we're building them as safe, equitable, and sustainable pieces of the network, and that we're focusing on safety and healthy communities when we're designing and thinking about the site and the street. And just a quick look at our timeline. So I talked about that first phase of engagement from August 22 to January 2023. We called that our launch and listen phase. There were a lot of just open dialogues and community conversations just to figure out what those common goals were. And now we are in the second phase of our work here, which is focused on the street concept layout. So what that street will look like, and also something we're calling a public space framework. We're in the second part of this. So we had a first part earlier in the summer where we talked about what people wanted to see on the site, what kinds of uses and priorities they had for the public space framework and for the street layout. Now we're actually sharing out design concepts or options with people to get feedback on those and see what resonates and what doesn't. And then our last part of this round of engagement and design is to actually bring out a recommendation for both the public space framework and the street concept. We expect that will happen likely in early 2024. And then next year, we'll move into a third phase of community engagement, which will focus on the development itself. We have on this timeline still that the Kmart will be demolished in March 2024. It sounds like that will be expedited, I suppose, pretty soon here.
It starts tomorrow.
There, so we're ahead of timeline. We're ahead of schedule here, which is great for these types of projects. We still expect, even with the Kmart coming down sooner, that we will not start construction on the road and the bridge until 2025. We need some time after getting that concept recommendation through to actually design the street and the bridge that crosses the Midtown Greenway. So we've got some time still to do that, to do those plans. So I talked about this briefly, this phase 2, where we asked about uses and priorities for the street and the public space framework. We had an online survey out. We got about 3,000 responses on that. About a third of those responses were from people living in the 4 surrounding neighborhoods. We had 16 different events, and we talked about to almost 700 folks about what they wanted to see for the street and the public space framework. You can see some photos from us being out at the transit stops and out on the street tabling to get some feedback from people in the community. And what we heard, so for the roadway or the new street pieces of feedback, we heard strongly that people were interested in seeing a pedestrian-friendly new Nicollet Avenue, that it really supported and was welcoming to people walking in and through the area. There was strong support for boulevards and green space, having plenty of space to soften and bring some of those green elements to the design. We heard a little bit of mixed input on bike infrastructure. If you can think about the site today, there's a bikeway on Blaisdell just to the west of the site, and there's a bikeway on First Avenue, which will be upgraded to a new 2-way protected bikeway with the First Avenue reconstruction project, which is coming here in the next couple of years. So there was thoughts about, well, is the bike network well served by the existing bike infrastructure in the area? Does there need to be anything on Nicollet? So people were, some people said, yes, we should still have bikeway infrastructure on Nicollet. And some people said, no, there's plenty of options in the area that connect to the bigger network here. For the public space question, so we asked about what types of activities would be helpful or people would want to see in the area. There's a strong desire for a community space, something like a park or a community building, making sure that it's flexible. So there are multiple ways to use the space in different seasons, thinking about how to, again, add in more of that green space, trees, gardens, pollinator gardens, open green space, shade trees, those types of things. There was interest in what we were thinking of a linear park, so something that either followed the Greenway or followed the new Nicollet Avenue as it comes through the site. So we'll see some of those design options put together based on that feedback that we heard earlier. And then one big part that we were asking about related to the bikeway and the pedestrian network in the area was about how we connect to the Midtown Greenway. We know that there's an entrance today off of Nicollet Avenue. It's a very popular entrance, but it's a very constrained entrance. There's a ramp that comes down to the west of Nicollet Avenue, and because of the position of that ramp in the corridor in the trench itself, it creates a narrow pinch point along the trail. So there's about 13 feet of width. You can see the photo on the left. Not a lot of space for people walking or biking in both directions through here. Typically along the Midtown Greenway, we're seeing widths of 18 to 22 feet. So because of the position of that ramp, it really constrains the experience down on the Greenway here. The ramp itself also is not ADA compliant. It's too steep to meet today's current standards for providing ADA access into the Greenway. So a couple of things that we're trying to address through this project. So with the project, it gives us also an option to connect to the bikeway network a little better. We mentioned those bikeways on Blaisdell and First Avenue. So we asked folks about what was important to them. Was that pinch point important? Was that connection to the bikeway important? And both those things resoundingly were very important for folks as they're thinking about how to connect down to the Greenway. So with this project, we're actually proposing to move the ramp from Nicollet Avenue to connect to First Avenue. Connects better to that brand new two-way bikeway that's coming down the line. It allows us some more space to widen the trail through this area. There's more space. You can kind of see there's more trees on that side of Nicollet Avenue where we could actually use that area to connect down into the Greenway without creating that same pinch point that we have on the west. So it'll be a more friendly, more welcoming condition for people both traveling through the Midtown Greenway and also connecting up into the street network. Pause there for questions. Yeah, you're on mute, but I see you saying.
If you've got a question, go ahead and shout it out. We're a small enough group here. Otherwise, we'll keep moving. Okay, so am I still? Yeah, I'm off mute. Okay. We're gonna go through some public space design concepts, and I think we'll just go ahead and overview city team, if you want to go ahead and overview all three of them, and then we can kind of go back and talk about the pros and cons of each one. And kind of get reactions from folks on each of them. I think it's been helpful for people to have the context of all three before sort of understanding how to weigh each of them individually. So I'll pass it back over to you.
Okay, I'll run through these three. And I'll just preface it with that we've been using the technical experience from consultants on a specific team to work on these three concepts with us, as well as some of the engineers that work on the project for the new Nicollet. And then, of course, all of the engagement that we've done to date, primarily most of the work that was done in our phase one throughout 2022 and early 23 really played a role in how these three concepts came to fruition. So the first one is a long linear park split on both sides of Nicollet, the new Nicollet, and running the entire length from Blaisdell to First along the Greenway. And so what this can do is, I think some of the pros, but there are lots of different pros and cons. I'm going to try to come up with some of the highlights from my perspective, Kelsey, and other city staff, or Kaylee and Maggie, as you've been doing a lot of the engagement, feel free to jump in with pros and cons after each of these. But I'll say that this one, a pro is that you get the full length of the Greenway connection for park views down into the Greenway and back up again. Right now, we are not in a position to be able to have pedestrian access to the Greenway from grade level down for a number of different reasons, from transportation planning across the entire metro. So with Metropolitan Council planning, Metro Transit planning, as well as Hennepin County planning and Greenway planning and all of that. So right now it would just be at grade level. So right at street level, rather, I guess. It does So I think that's kind of probably the biggest perk from this one. One of the things that I think is probably a downside that the park board talks to us about, we're working with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board for this because the city of Minneapolis isn't able to actually own the property. So we would be partnering with the park board. They would own the property, design, build, maintain the property. And from this perspective, they have some concerns about splitting their park and having to have part of it on one side of the street and part of it on another side of the street. There's some examples of that at other parks, and they have some challenges with having to split it. It doesn't mean that they don't and that they can't. It's just that they do see some challenges associated with having park users having to cross a busy street to get from one use to a different use. Anything else, colleagues, on this park concept day?
I guess I'll just throw out one of the things that we heard quite a bit in the first phase of community engagement is that Lake Street has a lot of concrete right now. There isn't a lot of green space or places to sort of rest along the Lake Street corridor. And so this one puts all of the park space sort of furthest on the site from Lake Street. So if that's something that is of interest, that doesn't support that one quite as well, that concept. But of course, we'll talk about the streetscape, the street designs as well, which might counteract some of those concerns. I think the other thing that we've heard about this one is that it maybe feels a little more exclusive, like hidden. And maybe that's, again, perspective of people who primarily would be accessing the site from the south or from the Lake Street corridor side. And could potentially be issues with shading if the majority of the development is on the south side of the park.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Anybody else have thoughts that have come up? Okay, we'll go on to concept B.
So one of the things this does is creates an even wider public space that people would see between the buildings. So some folks find that to be a good thing. Other folks I think find that to maybe be less appealing. And to Kaylee's point, it's hard to know if we should do the streets first or the park space first because they're so interactive. Pros and cons to both of those approaches. But here you'll see when we get to the street designs with our Public Works colleagues, you will see that there is quite a bit of green space in all four of our options for the new street. And so this would just be adding more. So we will have green space, meaning trees and vegetation in all of any option that we have for the new street. And this would just add more. So what this can do is it does create more of a promenade type, even though it's pretty wide. It would add some feeling of connection to Lake Street and amplifying what Lake Street offers when it comes to park space and green space, but pulling what would be commercial uses further away. So there's some benefits to having park space next to commercial there on the west side would be that if you go into a storefront or a coffee shop or a restaurant, you can then pull what you buy out and use or enjoy that in the park space, but it also pulls those businesses further away. So it's interesting to hear folks from this call think and speak to whether being pulled away really just draws your customers further away and doesn't, create the visibility that businesses often want and need from direct access to the actual street. So pros and cons to that one. This one has the least amount of space that fronts the greenway. So you'll see it's just right now, just like as depicted on this image, 3 trees. So that's a pretty narrow space that's connected directly to the greenway. We heard a lot of folks that want the connection to the greenway. So this provides the least amount of that. It also doesn't have an east-west connection for across the entire site from a mid-block east-west connection through the entire site. You have to, if you're going to go all the way from Blaisdell to First, you need to either continue to be at Lake Street as it is today, or you need to be up at Cecil Newman and 29th. And so it doesn't change the current status quo of an east-west connection through all the way from First to Blaisdell. So that's another con to this one. Anything else people would add for this?
I think what I would say is I've been hearing that this one, just in terms of that commercial corridor perspective, this one is the least preferable, if what I'm hearing. Just because it sort of, as T alluded to before, but kind of breaks up the continuity of businesses fronting, the immediate Lake Street or Nicollet Avenue corridor. And so I think the other thing I've heard is that it just feels like it is the least efficient uses of the green space. Like they don't have as much impact because they're more sort of spread out from each other. And maybe that's, speaking to the sort of mirrored park space on either side of the street.
I've also heard that, oh my gosh, sorry, this is the least favorite too from parents, just because it's so close to the street and some kids, could run and get unfortunately hit. And also that if there'd be buildings around it, depending on the height, it could feel exclusive, like this is purely for these buildings and people might not actually come and enjoy those public spaces.
Thanks, Maggie. We'll head on to concept C and then open up for discussion.
Great. Thanks, Kaylee. So concept C is probably on the east side, the most traditional type park space. So you think about a lot of Minneapolis parks, you got a public street on, at least 2 sides, sometimes 3 or 4 sides. Here it would be half 1 block of the Greenway. I mean, it's the smaller side, but it would be all the way all along the Greenway between First and the new Nicollet. And then stretching down some number of feet from the Greenway to, mid-block or somewhere along the new stretch of Nicollet. And it's just one large rectangle, again, without a public street running through what the park board would potentially own. So this is, provides the largest area that's uninterrupted. And so therefore provides probably the most flexibility for what you can put in it from a public parks perspective. The other thing this one does is creates an east-west mid-block connection for bikes and peds that goes all the way from where being able to highlight the new entrance point from the Greenway, which is there at First, and then pulling people down southwest to the corner at Blaisdell and First. So trying to create some kind of mid-block crossing for pedestrians. And then this also shows for bicycles that doesn't require going from Lake all the way up to Cecil or 29th. And all then at grade. So some of the cons for this one, are just sort of the flip side of the pros for some of the others is you still have some portion, a long section of Nicollet that would be exposed to the park. So pros and cons of that. Also doesn't have the full length of the Greenway. And so some pros to that is that you would then be able to have some housing right up along the Greenway, but then you would, sort of lose that additional connection. I think this one, from my perspective, is out of the 3 is probably the one that would feel most inviting as public space. So trying to make sure that everyone is fully aware and feels you know, one thing is awareness, but another one is how do people feel and perceive a space? And that's really going to be the driver of use. And so we think that this one's going to feel most like anybody and everybody come. It's a public park. In large part, just because I think, you know, it's more of a traditional space. And so people will feel more like, oh, this is just, you know, another Minneapolis public park and anybody can go over here and hang out and use the space. So I think that's one of the other pros.
Yeah,
it is, you know, also fronting the other, you know, Nico, as I'm sure everyone's aware, is just on the other side. And so it shares the most space with Nico to the right, which some folks may find less appealing. But it does, until Nico makes a decision to move, it does allow for sun there and for not creating shading as it would come from higher rise buildings to the east. Anything I'm missing?
I think I think those are all really good points. I think just sort of reminding that the Greenway ramp connection will be on this top right corner here at First Avenue. So I think this one maybe does the best job of the three of sort of signaling that like this is where you get off to come to Eat Street. I think, what else was I gonna note on this one? I've heard people say that they really like that this one has both a bike and pedestrian mid-block crossing, but not all of them have. Because not a lot of people like to bike on Lake Street, actually. And so this is sort of a safer alternative to get from the protected bikeway on First and Blaisdell rather than going down to Lake if they don't need to go north to Cecil Newman. Some people really like this diagonal. I think some people are concerned that it could feel almost like an alley, like could potentially be unsafe. So I think if this, you know, general design is selected, it would be important to get that right, to make sure it's clear, like people, you know, can come in, that it's well lit, that there's, you know, ways to sort of activate that diagonal crossing. But I think generally people like that there's a way to get to Blaisdell from the east side of the site as well. Anybody else have anything on this one? All right.
No, actually, you guys did a great explanation. So don't have any question.
Awesome. Okay.
One question? What's the timeline for this road construction? When do you think the timeline will be?
Yeah, good question. We'll just pop back here for a quick moment. Rebecca or Kelsey, do you want to revisit that for a moment?
Yeah, I can talk about the roadway construction. So we're anticipating starting construction on the road and the bridge in 2025. I believe the public space will likely come after that, and Rebecca can maybe chime in with best guess on what that might look like.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to the public space, it's really gonna depend a lot on a number of factors that we don't have figured out yet. But it will be working with the park board in order to make sure that, you know, we can line things up as best we can. And there'll be considerations for whether we want the park as a new building or if we want the public space or the park space to be built prior to a building. It will certainly come after the street. But a lot of other factors are still sort of being considered.
Thank you for that. So hopping back to these three design concepts, really interested to get your thoughts as business and organization representatives on, you know, which of these feel preferable, or are there elements that you really like from some of these, but if they were sort of combined together, that would be an ideal scenario. It doesn't have to be, you know, all one or all another. So I'm just gonna kind of open it up. Feel free just to kind of, you can either raise your hand. I'm happy to call on folks or just go ahead and share what you think.
I'll just say I'm most interested in thinking about like what businesses north of 29th and Cecil Newman think is going to be best for the continuity of each street and retaining the strengths and assets that we currently have on each.
Jason, Tammy, Jesus, any thoughts?
No, it's for us, I think it's just, how, the road is obviously important. What it does to Cecil Newman right next to us. The buses, the big long buses with the new pylons that are up everywhere, turning that corner. They run over the day they were installed, but our big one's parking. I can't lie, like to know how, how the white space is going to work out. I definitely agree. The middle one seems to be the least appealing. Concept B. Personally, I think I like C better. I like the big park area. I think it's better for people. I like the trail going through it, both pedestrian as well as bikes, to get to the new Greenway entrance, which, obviously our customers are part of the hindrance with the current entrance to the Greenway because we use Paul's parking lot there at the car wash. That Paul's let us use. And, it'd be nice if Paul made a decision on what he's doing with his property instead of letting things constantly move in and out across the way over there. So I, personally, I like C better. I'm not sure how either one would have necessarily affect us. I like the really big green space, and I think it'd bring a lot of people, to our area. And kind of look like a start, it's a big space. I agree with it being, on the side that it is because of the light and the size of the buildings. We need some sunlight here in Minnesota because we're about to lose it for a while. That's kind of my thoughts.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jason. I like the concept C as well. Again, not sure how it really impact Whittier Clinic per se, but I think it looks the most appealing.
I agree. C is probably the one that looks the best. A, I wouldn't mind it because it's a lot closer to, the north side. And it would be, the entire park would be closer, but at the same time, I like how it looks, and it's gonna be nice once it's all constructed and what the businesses will be around there.
Awesome, thank you. Assad, anything you want to throw out on any of these designs?
No, actually, this is a great explanation, and hopefully, when you send me the video, I will listen again, and if I have any question, I will let you know.
Okay.
I'll also send you an email, so we should have a meeting. I want to meet with you as well, Kelly. So thank you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Assad. Okay, cool. City folks, any other questions you want to throw out for public space before we move on to the street?
No, I think we should move on to the street.
All right, let's do it. Take it away.
All right, I'll jump in here. So with the street concepts, we developed 4 different street concepts to share out for feedback. They're all based on a lot of that community input that we've heard so far, city policies, and then those project goals that we talked about. So there's a variety of them here to share with you today, and just interested in hearing your thoughts and what you like and what you don't like about each of these. The first street concept is kind of a typical street. There's a vehicle lane in either direction. There's alternating sides for parking and green space. We're looking for getting that really wide green space again. So to do that, and to also add some traffic calming elements to the area, we're recommending doing one side with a really wide green space and the other side with some parking, and that will kind of flip back along the length of the corridor to give some feel to people that there's a friction or an edge for them to slow down as they're coming through and travel safely through the area. This one also has wide sidewalks, so we're looking at 10-foot sidewalks on either side, and then some space for furnishing zones. So furnishing zones typically have space allocated for things like sidewalk cafes, for bike racks, for different types of pieces of public street amenities that you can fit into that space. So that's the first concept, and you can kind of see a rendering on the left of what that might look like, what that space could look like, and then an overview shot on the right. And then the second concept, similar to the first, in that it's open again to all vehicles coming through here. It's got a vehicle lane in each direction. It still has that alternating parking and wide green spaces. The addition that we make here is that we put in a center median. So the median in the center, and this is another thing that we use for traffic calming. So having that, again, that hard edge in the middle helps people communicate to people that they should drive cautiously and drive safely through the area. So the median provides a little bit of that traffic calming effect. Then also allows for those types of mid-block crossings to be plugged into those. So it gives a space for people to, as they're crossing one lane, to wait in the middle, look down the way to make sure there's no one coming, and then cross. So there's a safety benefit here for not only people driving, but people crossing the street on walking or biking. This one, because that median does take a little space from the green space and a little space from the sidewalk. So we're looking at 8-foot sidewalks on these, a little less wide green space, and then furnishing zones again for some of those street cafes or sidewalk cafes on either side. Again, on the left, you can see a little bit of what this could look like with that median added in the center, and then the overview shot on the right. We're still, again, looking at this concept that has the alternating wider green spaces and parking, again, for that, providing some of those curbside amenities that people are looking for, like delivery, parking, those types of things, but also giving a little more space for greening and also providing that traffic calming effect that we're looking for. The third concept is similar to the second in that it has that median again, but the one thing that we've pulled out here is that we're not providing any curbside uses. So there's no parking spots, there's no space for deliveries or drop-offs, and the benefit here is that you get more space for green. So having heard so much about greening and the importance of that, we're just putting this out to kind of gauge interest in which things are more important for people when they see it rolled out on the page. Are we still sticking with that greening? Are we sticking with those kind of curbside uses that do take up some space in the corridor? Again, we're looking at a median here to provide that traffic calming effect. The street is open to transit, private, and emergency vehicles. It's got that wide green space, and then sidewalk furnishing zones and sidewalk spaces on either side. So you can see what that looks like there on the left, and then that kind of overview shot on the right. And then the last concept that we put together is based on some of our policies about prioritizing transit on the street and some of the feedback that we heard from people who only wanted to see transit on the street. So we put together a concept to see what that looks like. This one only allows for transit and emergency vehicles on the roadway, something similar to Nicollet Mall downtown. It has wide spaces for greening. It has wide spaces for that curbside, or that furnishing zone for those things like sidewalk cafes and bike racks, etc. And then it also is able to fit in those 10-foot wide sidewalks. So again, we're getting that wide pedestrian space in this concept as well. And you can see a little bit what that looks like on the left and the overview shot on the right. So a lot of these have elements that we can mix and match along the corridor, but just wanted to kind of put out some things and get feedback from people on what things they want to see for the new street. We realize it hasn't been open in 50 years, so there's lots of different ideas about what this street could do and what it should look like. So we're just trying to get some feedback here today.
Thanks, Kelsey. We'll open it up for group discussion on what elements you really like about each of them or don't like, and we can kind of start there. Anybody want to throw something out to start? I know, Jason, you had mentioned parking a little bit earlier. How do these designs strike you?
Yeah, no, I mean, number one, and I'm trying to, the one with the transit only, I mean, obviously, I don't think that one makes sense. You know, I'd love, people are making this weird S curve on Cecil Newman that's coming down first, and like just to have direct access to Eat Street. I think it's you know, it brings in the people we need, you know, for the businesses and the community. It's easy access. They're in and out quickly. A lot of people get confused by all the one ways already coming in from suburbs to enjoy our businesses. And now we've got a transit only to mix into one ways. I think I would say no to that personally. You know, I understand having the median, you know, safety wise for people crossing the street, a place to stop. I think that also makes it probably harder for the people to plow quickly. You know, now we've got this median that we're worried about to clean up the snow as quickly as possible in the winter. So from that standpoint, I probably think, you know, that's, I mean, but that's what you guys do for a living, is figure out the balance of those things. It's not me. You know, I like having a little bit of extra parking. I like the look of the sidewalks at Cafe Feel. You know, it's very inviting and opening up to, you know, to get people started on Eat Street and see what all we have to offer.
So it sounds like you're leaning towards this concept one where there's no median.
Yeah, I would say probably one.
Okay.
I think because then we get more of the green space by not having the middle, you know, the median. To increase that green space, I think would be a beautiful thing.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, this is Tammy again. Agree with Jason, definitely with the parking. And then, so street concept one is without the median, and is it 3 that has the median?
2 and 3 both have medians. Yep.
Yeah, I would lean towards with the no median as well. So it's street concept 1.
Good. Jesus, anything else you want to throw out?
No, nothing to add on that. I agree with them. Number one, I was leaning for 2, but then I thought about the plowing once Jason mentioned it, and it makes complete sense. Number 1.
Kelsey, is there anything, any context that folks should know about, like how they navigate plowing and that kind of thing with those types of medians?
Yeah, a few things to know about the median. So with fire code, the median would have to be a little rounded at the edge, so we wouldn't have as hard curb lines as we do with many of our curbs across the city. So it makes it a little easier for plowing in particular. The fire trucks would need to be able to cross over that, so we would have to keep it clear through the winter. So that would be something, an extra consideration for our maintenance crews to be able to do. There are other medians across the city that we do the same thing with. Again, it's a additional consideration for maintenance. I think that's certainly a good thing to call out, but it's something that our crews are used to doing. It can be done, but there is, there's a trade-off to that as well. It's extra work.
Thank you. So it sounds like folks are generally leaning towards concept 1 in this crew. Are there things that you see in the other concepts, different elements that you really like or that you would hope could be enhanced in concept 1, or do you like sort of the way it's laid out as is?
I think it looks good as is. You know, I like the 10-foot sidewalks. It's a nice, good sized green space.
Jason? Yeah, we did a focus group on Saturday with some folks, and a lot of them are pedestrians or wheelchair users, and they indicated the 10-foot sidewalks were really great as well. So it's good to hear you agree with that.
Yeah, I can
Right.
add in one thing that we're looking at for these concepts in general is potentially flipping some of the sidewalk cafe space with the sidewalk space, so there's cafe space along the edge of the buildings. That's more of a traditional way that we see it along East Street to the north here. So that's something we're looking at as well, and could be something that we roll out with a recommendation in our next step.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like as a person, you know, walking here on East Street, just like walking along and having that flip space, could that potentially be an issue for people with on mobility devices if like the tables and furnishings kind of, you know, start crouching on sidewalk space?
Yeah, it certainly is something that we want to keep separate so that there's what we call a pedestrian access route, an ADA clear space for people to be able to traverse through that is easy to understand too. So we don't want to kind of weave people through, right? We don't want to have a sidewalk cafe up against a building and then a sidewalk cafe up against the street. We want to make sure that there's a clear, easy route for people who are blind or in wheelchairs or deaf or whatever the case, traversing the sidewalk, that they're able to do it in an easy way. So whatever design we land on, it'll be consistent throughout the block.
Thanks, Kelsey. Does that answer your question, Maggie?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Wonderful. Okay. Just out of curiosity, Jason, as kind of one of the restaurant owners here, do you have an opinion on, just from like an operations perspective, of whether it would be preferable to have those sort of cafe seating spaces, you know, right adjacent to the building, or if I think in other cities I have seen more of this setup where, you know, the seating is a little bit closer to the street with pedestrians going in between. Do you have any thoughts on what might be preferable?
Yeah, it's stuff, you know, I see it both ways, and I, you know, had restaurants with it both ways before. Um, you know, securing those items that are further away from your building in this area would be something that I would, knowing that my tables and chairs are further away from my entrance and knowing what happens late at night around this area. So I would want to make sure that I could have those items secured pretty easily without having to drag them and move them and create a lot of work. Other than that, I don't have a preference between up next to the building and further out. Both have a, you know, if both are designed well, that both can be very beautiful and they can represent the restaurants really well. So, but just securing your items, you know, that are over there would just be my only concern.
Yeah, great point. Kelsey, do you know if there are any other sort of questions they're trying to work through to make that decision?
A little bit is about just where that parking falls next to, if there is curbside parking next to those spaces. We don't want to have them lined up right next door to each other so that people can get in and out of their cars without bumping into a table, right? So that's an operational concern there. We're also thinking about phasing as we roll this out. We expect that, you know, the development will come sometime after the street goes in. We want to have a functioning street that's well maintained and well managed between the time that we open and the time that businesses come in and start having some of those sidewalk cafes. So we expect there's going to be some time between, and so we could actually build a smaller profile. It's a little bit easier, and then we could build out to what the development needs on either side as we get a little bit closer to understanding more what that development is looking for. So there's a little bit of phasing questions to it. There's a little bit of like operational, how does the street or the parking or the restaurant space operate next to those sidewalk cafes. So those are some of the factors that I think are we're looking into and thinking more about, but having the kind of business perspective too on what works well is really helpful to know. I think traditionally in the city, it's more likely that you see sidewalk cafes up against the buildings. And that's, I think, is because a lot of our spots have curbside uses, and there's not that amount of space to allow someone to open a door and to have that sidewalk cafe there. But doesn't mean in this case, since we have that, we may have that space, and so that may not be the determining factor, but we'll know more as we start laying it out on a layout and kind of figuring out how things are fitting into the space.
That's helpful. Thank you. One question I have, if you could speak a little bit to sort of along the same lines as I think maybe what Maggie's thinking about. Like, we think about the stretch of Nicollet Avenue, you know, for example, between 26th and 25th. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more about like the width of the street that we're looking at here in these renderings in comparison to the roadway as it is north and south of this one block, and if any of these sort of street design decisions, if there's just any considerations for what is already here north and south.
Yeah, so we're gonna have more space here than we have on the street to the north and to the south. Typically the corridor has had 80 feet of right of way, and so when you're thinking about right of way, it's usually from building face to building face. So north of here in that section that Kaylee's talking about in particular, that is 80 feet of right of way. And so we're looking at more space here so that we can build in more of that green space. If you're walking along East Street, it's a great environment. It feels very, you know, there's lots of places and restaurants along the way to stop. There's not a lot of trees. There's a few kind of trees and tree grates along the way. There's not that kind of wide greening that we are really looking for with this project. So we're looking to add in more space to provide that greening, to provide some of that space to be able to do that. Also, we have new stormwater ordinance requirements that we need to meet. So we need to treat a certain amount of stormwater. And so in order to do that, we really do need more space through here. So it's going to be a little bit wider of a kind of right away than it is to the north and to the south here. But the hope is that there's a lot of welcoming greening, a lot of space for those kind of business sidewalk cafe types of uses. So it's more of a welcoming space, even though it's wider. I don't expect the street, just given the profiles that we have so far, will be wider than they are to the north and south here. They'll actually probably be not as wide as they are, given that kind of alternating green space and parking spaces that we're looking at, and those different concepts that we have. All of them have a narrower street cross section for the actual between the curbs, but we're looking at making sure that we have enough of those pedestrian amenities, having enough of that green space, having enough of that space for sidewalk cafes, and supporting those business uses on either side.
That's really helpful. Thank you. All right, let's get back in here. I think we are nearing the end of our slides here, but just wanted to take a moment to offer some time if anybody has anything else they want to ask, or just other things that you are hoping the city will keep in mind as they're sort of making some decisions towards a final design.
Yeah, I should mention too, I guess for the group, and especially knowing that we've got Jason from East Street Crossing here, that we're in Whittier Clinic, that our project, since we're rebuilding the bridge, we're looking also that we'll likely have to rebuild the intersection of Cecil Newman and 29th. So we're working on some designs for that and how to improve that condition from what it is today, but know that will be part of our scope, that we'll be looking to make some changes there, and then trying to make it work a little bit better, knowing that there's different kinds of uses. And if the road does reopen, there'll be different types of traffic coming through there, different types of patterns. So we'll be looking to adjust things accordingly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to step aside for a second. So I missed a couple minutes of comments on the street designs, but just wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts about, this is a question that I don't know the answer to, and I'm interested in finding out more from business owners, is if right now in the options where parking is provided, it's split. It's like there'll be like 5 stalls on the east side and then 5 stalls on the left side. And so is that better, or is having all 10 on one side better? Or is it really 6 of one, half dozen of the other? I've just had folks, talk to me about the plowing and how poor our plowing is. And I know that I don't want to throw my colleagues in public works under the bus. It's really hard to plow in the city of Minneapolis for a number of reasons. But talking with folks yesterday on this project as well, right there in the neighborhood, a lot of folks who walk, and just trying to navigate snow is challenging in any mode of transportation. It's hard. And, being able to like scoot in and try to plow just a little bay, in their experience wasn't the ideal. And they were just wondering if you put all of them on one side versus splitting them up, if there was preference there. And Kaylee, I guess we haven't chatted about that. I didn't know how to answer the question yesterday very well when it came up about whether we could put all 10 parking spots on one side, or if splitting them 50-50 is really, the only option as we've shown it.
I wonder if it might depend on which park space design is chosen as well, like where the park space is, like, because I know all these street designs are, you can mix and match with any of the park space designs, but there might be, for example, if you go with park space concept B, it might not make sense to have parking one way or another. Maybe it does. So I wonder if that's just a question that comes depending on how the final design starts to shape up. You have thoughts on that, Jason, as kind of a business owner, or Tammy and Jesus?
Whatever's easiest on the snowplows, to be honest. And I think, Rebecca, your point, it makes perfect sense. If it's tougher on these crews who are already, working hard and long hours during that season, it's, I think it's definitely worth thinking about. And I do agree, if depending on the concept, like if you pick the concept 2, well, then it would make sense to have all the parking spots right next to the park on that side. So personally, I prefer obviously another concept, but if you chose that one, I think it would make sense to have all the parking spots next to it, for people to come enjoy the park they built. But no, I would lean, simplistic for, all these workers helping us to keep Eat Street operational and Nicollet moving.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead, Jesus. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with what Jason said. It makes complete sense that if we go with concept 2, we're going to keep that parking on that end, and keeping it simple to the crew.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can take back to our public works. We work closely with our folks that run the plows through here to make sure that our designs are supporting both sides of what we need to do. One important consideration here is safety concerns. We heard a lot about the need for traffic calming, and so that alternating parking does give us some benefit of having some of that traffic calming. We know the street to the north and to the south of here on what's called the city's Vision Zero network, which means a disproportionate number of our crashes in the city that are severe or fatal happen on those streets. So we want to make sure that we're designing a street that people will operate cautiously and with prudence on, to make sure that they're traveling in a safe and calm fashion through here. So that's one thing that we'll put into play. It's not the only traffic calming device we have, of course. So we will be looking at what types of mix of things we can put in here to make sure we're getting the right speeds.
Awesome. City team, anything else you sort of been pondering on that you'd like a couple more, perspectives on?
That was my big question. I will just mention to to Jesus and your colleague from Whittier Clinic. I have met with your colleague William, and not gonna get his last name. I'd have to go find it in my emails. Who's in your real estate group about the future of your parking lot. And so just wanted to let you guys know that we are connected, or at least I am connected to your clinic that way. And it's really exciting to see you and hear your voices today on this call, and to know that you're also engaged just in the actual clinic's use, and not necessarily the real estate piece. So much of this is interconnected, and it's important for us all to keep and then sort of connected and on top of what everyone's needs are, both for planning for the future as well as today's needs. So just happy you're here. Good to meet you. And just so you know, I am on a sort of infrequent but names basis with your colleague in real estate there at HHS.
Bill
Thanks for being here.
Rebecca, was it Bill Howden?
No, let me look. William somebody.
Because we've had some, Bill has left, if that's who it was, but I can always connect you with somebody else.
Let me, I know exactly where I have his name. I just gotta go to it. But yeah, if there's somebody else that I should be talking about, the future of that location and of your, it's a parking lot, so you don't want it to be a parking lot anymore, right? But there probably may or may not be a time when we have a new Nicollet open and it won't be a parking lot anymore, and it could potentially be expanded uses by HHS, or it could become something different. And so teams, where am I? Here we go. His name is Bill Howden.
Yeah.
Bill Howden.
I thought. Yep. So is
that who you just said?
Yep. So he's no longer with the organization. So I can connect you.
He's not?
No. So Paul Trudeau has been taking over some of his responsibilities.
Okay.
Wanted to make you aware of that.
Yeah, if you could shoot the new Bill Howden over to Kaylee, and she can get it to me,
sure.
Or I can put my email in the chat, because I do appreciate being able to check in with your real estate folks every once in a while, because it feels like as all organizations, there's continual need to reassess real estate needs and service needs, and where you need services and where you need to add more, take away, and all of that. And so it is good. I really appreciate being able to keep in touch with a single real estate person. I mean, I'm guessing I always go back to Rick Sheridan, who's your attorney.
Yeah.
Rick's always the one that gets me back in touch with the right folks, but it's good to know that Kaylee also has other folks' names there.
I'll send you his contact information.
Awesome. That'd be great. All right. We're gonna just talk quickly here. We are wrapping up engagement for the second part of phase 2 engagement right now. So Wednesday morning, the 15th this week at 9 o'clock is when the survey closes. There is the survey online on the city's website is available in English, Spanish, and Somali. If you have not taken the survey yet, we're capturing all of the feedback that you all shared here today, which is fantastic. If you've got another decision maker or another important perspective at your organization or your business that you'd like to have weigh in, please do share this opportunity with them. We'll put a link in the chat as well for the direct location to the city's website where you can access the survey. As far as sort of where the designs go from here, the city team, so we'll all be processing all the feedback that we've gotten the last month and a half or so, and sort of distill down a
a preferred design, and that will move through city approvals process by early 2024. Anything else, city staff, that folks should know about sort of when to keep an eye out for those opportunities? We'll of course be communicating any updates out, or when that preferred design is public, we'll of course send that out to the list of folks that received this meeting invite. But yeah, anything else to folks should know about that?
If we all stay on schedule, we'll likely be looking at bringing something out in February or March of next year. So we've got kind of hopefully a Q1 kind of share out of what we're recommending, but we'll see when we get there. We've got a lot of data to go through here from what we've heard and compile that down in a recommendation. So a little bit of work still to go for our team.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for being here today. Oh, thank you, Assad, for being here. Yeah, there's to stay up to date with the project, minneapolismin.gov/new Nicollet. If you also Google City of Minneapolis Kmart or new Nicollet, you will be able to find the project page that way as well. But lots more to come on this project, and we'll keep everybody up to date.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Jason.
Bye.